The red warning lights flashed across every screen in the command center as urgent messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Captain Thrace felt his scaled skin tighten with worry as he read report after report about the humans. These strange, bipedal creatures had appeared seemingly from nowhere and were now spreading across space faster than any species in recorded history, Commander. Vel clicked her mandibles together in agitation as she studied the latest intelligence data. The insectoid warrior had seen many species rise and fall during her long military career, but nothing like this. Humans were establishing colonies on worlds that other species had written off as completely uninhabitable. They were mining asteroids in radiation fields that would kill most life forms in seconds. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy doing these impossible things. The holographic display showed a detailed map of human expansion over the past 5 years, green dots marked their colonies, and there were far too many of them. Worlds with crushing gravity, planets bathed in deadly radiation, moons with toxic atmospheres thick enough to dissolve metal. All of them now had human settlements marked with cheerful little green dots. "This cannot continue," Thrace said, his reptilian voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "The Galactic Council has made its decision. We will send a message that even these humans can understand." The target was perfect for making that message clear. Haven 7 sat on the very edge of human space, a world that should have been impossible to colonize. The planet suffered from constant electromagnetic storms that could fry electronics from orbit. Surface temperatures regularly reached levels that would boil the blood of most species. The atmosphere contained chemicals that were toxic to nearly every known form of life. It was exactly the kind of place that proved humans had gone too far. Intelligence. Reports suggested only a small research station existed on Haven 7, perhaps 20 humans at most, probably scientists studying the planet's extreme conditions from the safety of heavily shielded bunkers. It would be a simple matter to overwhelm them with superior firepower and technology. The message would be clear: humanity's reckless expansion into dangerous territory would not be tolerated. Vel selected her strike team carefully. 20 of the finest warriors from across the Galactic Council species. Each soldier was chosen for specific combat skills that would complement the others. There were Corvani with their natural armor and strength, Mantecs with their speed and precision, and several other species known for their military prowess. All of them were veterans who had served in dozens of successful operations. The ship itself was a masterpiece of Council engineering. The Dominion's Edge carried enough firepower to level a small city and shields, strong enough to withstand direct hits from orbital defense platforms. Its sensors could detect a single life form from thousands of kilometers away. Its weapons could precision strike targets no larger than a human head. Against a small research station, it was massive overkill. As they approached Haven 7, the planet's hostile nature became immediately apparent. Lightning storms larger than entire continents raged across its surface. The electromagnetic interference was so intense that it took constant adjustments to maintain communications with the ship. Temperatures. Readings showed surface heat that would melt most standard equipment within minutes of exposure. "How do they even survive down there?" asked Zekt, the youngest member of the strike team. The young Corvani had never seen conditions this extreme on any inhabited world. "They probably don't go outside much," Vel replied, checking her weapon. Systems one final time. "Humans may be stubborn, but they're not completely insane. They must be living in underground bunkers or heavily protected domes." The initial orbital scans revealed the human settlement exactly where intelligence had predicted. It appeared to be a cluster of simple buildings connected by covered walkways. There were no visible defensive systems, no shields, no weapons emplacements. It looked more like a small town than a military installation or research facility. Several humans could be seen moving between buildings, apparently going about their daily business despite the hellish conditions outside. "Are they wearing protective suits?" Thrace asked, studying the scanner readings more closely. The sensor operator, a pale Etherian with large black eyes, double-checked the data before responding. No, sir, they appear to be wearing standard clothing, light fabrics, actually. Some of them seem to be working in what looks like outdoor gardens. This information caused a moment of confused silence in the command center. Working in outdoor gardens on Haven 7 should have been impossible. The surface conditions would kill an unprotected humanoid in seconds. Yet the scanner data clearly showed humans moving around outside as if they were on some pleasant agricultural world. Sensor malfunction, Vel decided firmly. These readings can't be accurate. The electromagnetic interference must be affecting our equipment. Thrace nodded in agreement, though privately he wondered if their intelligence about human physiology might be incomplete. Still, there were limits to biological adaptation. No species could simply ignore the laws of physics and chemistry. The humans had to be using some form of advanced technology to protect themselves. The strike team prepared for insertion with professional efficiency. They checked their environmental suits multiple times, knowing that even a small breach would mean certain death in Haven 7's hostile atmosphere. Their weapons were loaded with ammunition designed to penetrate the heaviest armor. Emergency medical supplies were distributed in case of casualties. Every possible contingency had been planned for except one dot as the assault craft descended through Haven 7's turbulent atmosphere. Vel reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Capture any humans who surrendered immediately. Eliminate those who resisted. Destroy the research facility to send a clear message about the consequences of expanding into dangerous territory. Extract all useful intelligence about human capabilities and technology. It was a straightforward military operation that should be completed within a few hours. The landing zone was a flat area just outside the human settlement. As the assault craft touched down, the strike team could see the full extent of the hostile environment around them. The air itself seemed to shimmer with heat and electrical discharge. The ground was scarred and blackened from constant lightning strikes. In the distance, geysers of superheated steam erupted regularly from cracks in the planet's surface, yet somehow, impossibly, the human buildings looked almost cheerful in this hellish landscape. Gardens with green plants surrounded several structures. Pathways were neatly maintained and clearly well used. It looked like a place where people actually lived and worked, not a desperate survival outpost clinging to existence in one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. Remember, Vel told her troops as they formed up for the assault, humans may look similar to some of our species, but they're still aliens. Don't let their appearance fool you into thinking they're harmless. The morning sun cast long shadows across the research station as Dr. Alex Reed knelt among his experimental plants. Steam rose from the soil around him where underground thermal vents provided the perfect growing conditions for his latest project. He had been working since dawn to collect samples before the afternoon electrical storms made outdoor work more challenging. A low humming sound made him look up from his work. Military aircraft were approaching from the eastern horizon, their alien design immediately obvious even at a distance. Reed wiped his hands on a small towel and stood up slowly, more curious than concerned about these unexpected visitors. First contact situations were always exciting from a scientific perspective. The alien craft landed with impressive precision, about 200 meters from the main research building. Reed could see armed figures emerging from the vehicles, their movements coordinated and professional. They were clearly military personnel, though he couldn't immediately identify which species they represented. The Galactic Council employed soldiers from dozens of different worlds. Attention humans. A voice boomed across the settlement through external speakers. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Lay down any weapons and gather in the central courtyard. You have 60 seconds to comply or we will use force. Reed considered this announcement while checking the temperature readings on his portable scanner. The morning thermal activity was particularly interesting today, with several new vents opening near the eastern perimeter. He made a mental note to investigate them later, assuming these visitors didn't mind waiting while he finished his work. Actually, Reed called back, raising his voice to carry across the distance, Would you folks like some coffee while we sort this out? I just made a fresh pot, and you've probably had a long journey. The aliens seemed confused by this response. They had formed a battle line and were advancing with weapons raised, but their leader had stopped to confer with several other soldiers. Reed took advantage of the pause to gather his sample containers and measurement tools. It would be unfortunate to lose data because of an interruption. Commander Vell's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled frustration. "Human, this is your final warning. Surrender now or face the consequences." "Oh, I heard." "You the first time," Reed replied pleasantly. "I'm just finishing up some time-sensitive measurements. The thermal gradient shifts pretty dramatically once the sun gets higher, and I'd hate to miss this opportunity. Give me just a few more minutes?" The aliens apparently decided that diplomacy wasn't working. Plasma bolts began striking the ground. Around Reed's position, each shot precisely aimed to intimidate rather than kill. The energy weapons left glowing craters in the rocky soil and filled the air with the sharp smell of ozone and melted stone. Most sentient beings would have immediately sought cover or surrendered when faced with such an overwhelming display of firepower. Reed simply moved his equipment to a safer location and continued working. "Fascinating," he muttered to himself, using a handheld scanner to analyze the energy signatures from the weapon's fire. Those plasma charges are running much hotter than standard military specifications. I wonder if they've made modifications for extreme environment operations. The precision shooting quickly escalated to direct fire. Plasma bolts seared the air inches from Reed's head as he calmly transferred his plant samples to protective containers. His greenhouse laboratory took several direct hits, filling the building with smoke and flame that would have driven out most life forms. Reed walked through the burning structure to retrieve a forgotten datapad, apparently unconcerned by the intense heat and toxic fumes. When he emerged from the flames, his clothing was singed and his hair was slightly disheveled, but he appeared completely unharmed. He was still carrying his coffee mug in one hand and his sample containers in the other. Behind him, two more humans walked out of the burning building as if they were simply leaving their office at the end of a normal workday. Dr. Maya Santos brushed ash from her jacket and looked up at the stormy sky with professional interest. "Alex, do you think this fire will affect the atmospheric readings we planned for this afternoon? The thermal updrafts might skew our data." Tom Bradley, the settlement's mining foreman, examined the damage to their equipment with the critical eye of someone calculating repair costs. "Well, the good news is that the electromagnetic interference from their weapons is giving us some excellent data on how our systems handle unexpected energy surges. The bad news is that we're probably going to need new greenhouse panels." The alien strike team had stopped advancing entirely. Several soldiers were staring in disbelief at the humans who had just walked through fire that should have killed them instantly. Others were checking their weapons to make sure they were actually firing at full power. A few were backing away from the humans as if proximity to them might be dangerous. Commander Vell's tactical training took over even as her understanding of the situation began to crumble. If direct weapons fire wasn't effective, then it was time to escalate to heavy ordnance. She ordered her troops to deploy incendiary weapons designed to flush enemies out of fortified positions by creating fires hot enough to melt metal. The aliens launched a coordinated barrage that turned the central area of the research station into an inferno. Temperatures soared to levels that would have been lethal to most known life forms. The flames reached heights that made the burning greenhouse look like a small campfire by comparison. Toxic smoke filled the air thick enough to be visible from orbit. Through this hellish landscape, the three humans continued their conversation about work schedules and research priorities. Reed had produced a small notebook and was sketching the flame patterns for future reference. Santos was taking atmospheric readings with a handheld device, occasionally making pleased sounds when she discovered particularly interesting data. Bradley was examining the effect of the extreme heat on various building materials. "You know," Reed said thoughtfully, pausing in his note-taking to sip his coffee, "I think this might actually be helping our soil composition experiments." The intense heat is breaking down some of the mineral deposits in ways that could be really useful for plant growth. Santos nodded enthusiastically while recording temperature measurements that should have been impossible for any unprotected person to survive. And the chemical reactions from their weapons are producing some atmospheric compounds I've never seen before. This could revolutionize our understanding of extreme weather chemistry. Bradley pointed to a section of building that was glowing white-hot from the alien weapons fire. If we can figure out how to reproduce this controlled heating effect, it might solve our problems with the mining operation in Sector 7. We've been looking for a way to process or at these exact temperatures. The aliens watched in growing horror as the humans treated their devastating attack like an interesting scientific demonstration. Several soldiers began backing toward their landing craft, their training and experience providing no context for what they were witnessing. Others stood frozen in disbelief, unable to process the evidence of their own eyes. Young Zekt, the Corvani recruit, lowered his weapon entirely and stared at the humans with something approaching awe rather than fear. In all his studies of military tactics and alien species, no one had ever mentioned the possibility of encountering beings who were completely immune to fire and plasma weapons. He began to wonder if the strike team had stumbled into something far beyond their ability to handle. Panic spread through the alien ranks like wildfire as Commander Vel realized that their standard weapons were completely ineffective against the humans. Her tactical computer showed direct hits on all 3 targets, energy readings that should have reduced them to ash, yet they were still walking around taking notes as if nothing had happened. Military doctrine demanded escalation to heavier weapons when initial attacks failed. All units, deploy siege cannons, Vel ordered through gritted mandibles. Target the main structures. If we can't eliminate them directly, we'll bring down their shelter and force them into the open. The siege weapons emerged from the alien assault craft like mechanical predators unfolding for a kill. These cannons were designed to crack bunkers and level fortified positions that could withstand orbital bombardment. Their energy beams could cut through solid rock like paper and turn steel into vapor. Against a simple research station built from standard materials, they should have been devastating overkill. Dr. Reed noticed the new weapons deployment with the same scientific curiosity he had shown toward everything else. "Oh, those look much more powerful," he commented to his colleagues, while measuring soil temperature with a handheld device. "Maya, you might want to move your atmospheric sensors. Those beam weapons could interfere with your readings." "Actually," Santos replied, adjusting her equipment to face the aliens directly, "I'm hoping they'll interfere." The energy interaction between their weapons and our atmospheric conditions could provide some fascinating data about charged particle behavior in high electromagnetic environments. Tom Bradley was more practical in his assessment. "Those cannons look like they might damage our foundation systems if they hit the wrong spots. Should we invite them inside until they're finished? The main lab has pretty good shielding, and I just finished installing the new coffee machine." The suggestion that they invite armed attackers inside for refreshments while under heavy weapons fire struck the aliens as either incredibly brave or completely insane. Several soldiers exchanged glances that clearly indicated they were beginning to question whether they were fighting humans or some unknown form of advanced artificial life that simply resembled organic beings. The siege cannons opened fire with a sound like thunder splitting the world in half. Energy beams 20 meters wide swept across the research station, turning buildings into clouds of superheated plasma and molten debris. The ground itself began to glow and bubble under the intense energy bombardment. Any normal structure would have been completely obliterated within seconds, yet somehow, through the overwhelming destruction, the humans continued their activities with minor adjustments for the new conditions. Reed had moved his plant samples to what he called a more stable location, which appeared to be directly in the path of the incoming artillery beams. He explained to anyone within earshot that the seismic vibrations from the weapons fire were providing excellent data about soil density variations. Santos had begun taking atmospheric readings of the weapon's discharge itself. apparently fascinated by the energy signatures and particle emissions. She moved through the bombardment zone with the casual confidence of someone taking a walk through a pleasant garden, occasionally stopping to adjust her instruments when a particularly interesting energy surge occurred. Bradley, meanwhile, had struck up a conversation with Zekt, the youngest alien soldier, who had found himself separated from his unit during the chaos of the heavy weapons deployment. The mining foreman seemed genuinely concerned about the young Corvani's welfare in such dangerous conditions. "You should really be wearing better protection in this environment," Bradley told Zekt while standing in what looked like the center of an active volcano. "Haven 7 can be pretty rough on visitors who aren't used to the conditions. We've got some spare gear back in storage if you need it." Zekt stared at the human in disbelief. The mining foreman was offering safety equipment while surrounded by energy beams that could vaporize starship armor. His own environmental suit was already showing warning signs from the extreme heat and radiation, yet this human was standing in the same conditions wearing nothing more protective than work clothes and boots. "How are you not dead?" Zekt asked, his voice cracking with confusion and fear. Bradley looked puzzled by the question. "Dead? Why would I be dead? This is pretty typical weather for Haven 7. Actually, it's been unusually mild this week. Last month we had thermal storms that pushed surface temperatures up another 50 degrees. Now that was uncomfortable." The young alien's worldview began to collapse as he processed this information. Haven 7's current conditions were severe enough to kill most known life forms in minutes, yet this human was describing them as mild and comfortable. What did that say about human physiology and their natural environment? Where do humans come from originally? Zekt found himself asking, though military protocol strictly forbade casual conversation with enemy targets. "Earth," Bradley replied helpfully. "Nice little planet in the Sol system. Bit cooler than here, but we've done a lot of terraforming work to make it more comfortable over the centuries. Added some atmosphere, raised the average temperature, increased the radiation levels to something more reasonable." This casual description of planetary modification for the purpose of making worlds more dangerous rather than safer sent chills through Zekt's scaled spine. He began to understand that his species might have made a terrible mistake in attacking these creatures. Commander Vel's increasingly desperate voice crackled through the comm system as she ordered maximum firepower deployment. The siege cannons were joined by plasma mortar, particle beam weapons, and incendiary missiles designed to create fusion-level temperatures across wide areas. The combined bombardment turned the entire research station site into something resembling the surface of a star. Through this apocalyptic destruction, Dr. Reed's voice could be heard calling out scientific observations to his colleagues. "Maya, are you getting readings on the particle density changes from the fusion reactions? This could revolutionize our understanding of controlled stellar processes." Santa's enthusiastic response came from somewhere in the heart of the firestorm. "The energy conversion rates are incredible. Alex, we should definitely write this up for the Journal of Extreme Environment Sciences. Tom, can you get some samples of the ground fusion products? This could be exactly what we need for the deep crust mining project." The aliens finally understood that they weren't fighting a military engagement. They were providing a live-fire demonstration for scientists who found their most devastating weapons to be interesting research opportunities. The humans weren't just surviving the attack. They were taking professional notes and making plans for future applications. Several alien soldiers threw down their weapons and began backing toward the landing craft. Others stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. A few of the more experienced veterans began to suspect that they had encountered something far beyond their understanding of what was possible in the known universe. Zekt looked around at the hellish destruction surrounding them, then at Bradley, who was calmly explaining the benefits of geothermal energy while standing in temperatures that should have reduced him to constituent atoms. For the first time in his military career, the young Corvani began to wonder if surrender might be the wisest tactical option. The battlefield had become a place of impossible contradictions where normal military logic no longer applied. Alien soldiers found themselves lowering their weapons not in surrender, but in confused fascination as they watched humans treat devastating energy bombardments like mildly interesting weather phenomena. The carefully planned attack had evolved into something resembling a very dangerous scientific conference. Zek discovered that conversation with Tom Bradley was far more educational than his military briefings had been. The human mining foreman possessed an apparently endless supply of practical knowledge about surviving in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. More disturbing was his casual attitude toward dangers that would send entire alien fleets fleeing for their lives. The trick to working in high radiation environments? Bradley explained while standing in what appeared to be the epicenter of a nuclear explosion, is understanding that radiation is just another form of energy. Once you figure out how to use it productively instead of fighting it, everything becomes much easier. Use it productively? Zek asked, his environmental suit's warning system screaming alerts about lethal radiation exposure levels. Bradley nodded enthusiastically and pointed toward a series of structures that were glowing white-hot from weapons fire. Those are our primary power collectors. The radiation and thermal energy from your weapons are giving us enough power to run our entire operation for the next 6 months. We've been looking for a more efficient way to charge our systems, and this bombardment is working perfectly. The young Corvani's understanding of the situation shifted dramatically as he realized the humans weren't just surviving the attack, they were benefiting from it. Their research station was actually becoming more operational and better equipped as a result of the alien weapons fire. What had been intended as a devastating military strike was functioning as an infrastructure improvement project. Dr. Santos approached their conversation with her arms full of scientific instruments and an expression of pure joy on her face. Tom, you have to see these atmospheric readings. The energy interactions from their weapons are creating chemical compounds that we've only theorized about before. This data could revolutionize our understanding of stellar formation processes. She turned to Zek with the friendly curiosity of someone meeting an interesting colleague at an academic conference. Are you the weapons specialist for this group? The particle beam configurations on your equipment are absolutely fascinating. Would it be possible to get some technical specifications? We're always looking for more efficient ways to process raw materials. Zek found himself in the surreal position of being asked for weapon blueprints by the target of those same weapons. You want to know how our guns work so you can use them for mining? Exactly, Santos replied with obvious excitement. The precision and energy density are perfect for our deep excavation projects. We've been using standard fusion charges, but your weapons seem much more controllable and efficient. Before Zek could respond, Dr. Reed joined the group carrying what appeared to be a medical kit. Speaking of technical specifications, several of your colleagues look like they're having trouble with the environmental conditions. Would you like me to take a look at their equipment? We've gotten pretty good at modifying standard gear to work in extreme environments. The offer of medical assistance from their attack target to their assault force represented such a complete reversal of normal military protocol that Zek wasn't sure how to respond. Around them, other alien soldiers were having similar conversations with humans, who seemed genuinely concerned about their welfare and professionally interested in their equipment. Commander, Vel's voice cut through these surreal diplomatic exchanges. With another escalation order, all units, prepare orbital bombardment coordinates. If ground-based weapons are ineffective, we'll use the ship's main batteries to level the entire area. Reed looked up with mild concern, not for the impending bombardment, but for the aliens on the ground. You might want to get your people back to a safe distance. Orbital weapons can be pretty unpredictable in Haven 7's electromagnetic environment. The particle interactions might cause some unusual secondary effects. What kind of secondary effects? Vel's voice asked through the comm system, her professional curiosity temporarily overriding her military objectives. Santos consulted her instruments and made some quick calculations. While the energy discharge from orbital weapons will interact with our atmospheric composition to create fusion cascades. The result should be surface temperatures around 15,000 degrees across approximately a 50-kilometer radius. Nothing too dramatic, but probably uncomfortable for most species. The casual description of planet sterilizing temperatures as nothing too dramatic sent waves of disbelief through the alien forces. Several soldiers began a rapid tactical withdrawal toward their landing craft without waiting for orders. Others stood frozen as they tried to process the implications of what they were hearing. "You're saying that orbital bombardment will just make your planet warmer?" Zekt asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For a while," Reed confirmed helpfully. "Though we'll probably need to adjust our agricultural schedules to account for the temporary temperature increase. Some of our more delicate experiments don't do well above 12,000 degrees. Bradley nodded in agreement while examining some equipment that was still glowing from weapons fire. On the positive side, the fusion reactions should help with our geological surveys. The seismic activity from an orbital strike will give us detailed information about subsurface mineral deposits that we've been trying to map for months." The aliens finally began to understand the true scope of their mistake. They had attacked what they assumed was a vulnerable human outpost, but Haven 7 wasn't a desperate survival colony clinging to existence on the edge of habitability. It was actually one of humanity's more comfortable settlements, chosen specifically because its extreme conditions made it an ideal place for research and development. Dr. Santos cheerfully confirmed their worst fears as she explained their terraforming projects. "We're planning to increase the surface temperature by another 100 degrees over the next few years. The current conditions are nice, but we want to make Haven 7 really comfortable for long-term habitation. The radiation levels could also use some improvement." "You want to make it more dangerous?" Zekt asked in horror. "More challenging," Santos corrected gently. "Humans do our best work when we have interesting problems to solve. Haven 7 is pleasant enough, but it's not exactly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Our military installations are built in much more stimulating environments." The mention of human military bases operating in conditions that made Haven 7 look comfortable sent a collective shudder through the alien strike force. If this research station represented moderate living conditions for humans, what did their actual military installations look like? Reed seemed to read their thoughts with uncanny accuracy. "Oh, you'd love our base on Proxima Station. It's built inside a neutron star's magnetic field. The gravitational effects are incredible for materials research, and the radiation environment is perfect for testing new technologies. The living conditions are challenging enough to keep everyone sharp and focused." As orbital bombardment began, from the Dominion's edge high above, the humans watched with the same scientific interest they had shown toward all the previous attacks. Reed took careful notes on the energy patterns. Santos recorded atmospheric changes. Bradley calculated the practical applications for their ongoing projects. The aliens realized with growing terror that they weren't fighting humans, they were fighting the universe's most successful survivors, beings who had turned adaptation into an art form and found ways to thrive in conditions that would extinct entire civilizations. The orbital bombardment from the Dominion's edge lit up Haven 7's sky like a second sun as massive energy beams struck the research station with enough force to crack continental plates. The resulting explosion should have sterilized everything within a 100-kilometer radius and left a crater visible from space. Instead, the humans stood in the center of the devastation, taking measurements and making excited comments about the excellent data they were collecting. Captain Thrace watched the bombardment results from the ship's bridge with growing disbelief. His most powerful weapons were registering direct hits and complete target destruction, yet the human life signs remained steady and unchanged. More disturbing were the energy readings coming from the impact site, which suggested that the research station was somehow absorbing and redistributing the massive energy discharge rather than being destroyed by it. "Sir," the sensor operator reported with barely controlled panic in his voice, "the humans are using our weapons fire to power their facility systems. Energy output from their settlement has increased by 300% since we began the bombardment." Dr. Reed's voice crackled through the comm system with obvious enthusiasm. "Unknown vessel, this is Dr. Alex Reed at Haven 7 Research Station. That was absolutely fantastic. Would it be possible to get a repeat performance sometime next week? We're planning to test some new atmospheric processors, and this level of controlled energy input would be perfect for our calibration procedures. The request for a repeat bombardment from the target of that same bombardment represented such a complete breakdown of normal military logic that several bridge officers simply stared at their instruments in stunned silence. Thrace found himself wondering if his crew was having some form of collective hallucination brought on by Haven 7's electromagnetic interference. Commander Vell's report from the surface painted an even more disturbing picture. "Captain, the humans have invited us to dinner. They're preparing food using the thermal energy from our weapons fire, and they want to discuss technological cooperation agreements. Several of our soldiers are already accepting medical treatment from their personnel." "Medical treatment?" Thrace asked, his reptilian features twisting with confusion. "The humans are concerned about our equipment's performance in extreme environments. They're offering to upgrade our environmental suits and weapon systems to work more efficiently in high radiation conditions. Dr. Santos has apparently identified several design flaws in our plasma weapons that could be corrected with minor modifications. The image of human scientists offering to improve alien military equipment while that same equipment was actively trying to kill them struck Thrace as either the ultimate expression of peaceful intentions or something far more sinister. He began to suspect that humanity's expansion across the galaxy might not be the result of superior technology or military aggression, but something much more fundamental and terrifying. Tom Bradley's conversation with young Zect had evolved into an impromptu lecture on human colonial development that was reshaping the aliens' understanding of the species entirely. "The thing most people don't realize about human expansion," Bradley explained while standing in the molten crater left by orbital bombardment, "is that we're not really conquering hostile worlds. We're just finding places where other species can't live and making ourselves comfortable." "But these conditions would kill most life forms instantly," Zect protested, his environmental suit systems failing rapidly in the aftermath of the energy bombardment. Bradley nodded thoughtfully. "That's what makes them perfect for us. No competition for resources, no territorial disputes with existing populations, and plenty of interesting challenges to keep life from getting boring. Why would we want to live on worlds that other species already occupy when there are so many empty places just waiting for someone to appreciate them?" This perspective on human expansion as a form of environmental recycling rather than aggressive colonization forced Zek to reconsider everything he thought he knew about interspecies conflict. Humans weren't taking territory away from other species. They were claiming worlds that everyone else had already written off as completely uninhabitable. Dr. Santos joined the conversation with her arms full of data recordings, an expression of pure scientific joy. "Tom, you have to see what their orbital weapons did to our atmospheric chemistry. We've accidentally created stable fusion reactions in the upper atmosphere that should continue producing useful energy for months. This could be the breakthrough we need for our Venus terraforming project." "Venus terraforming?" Zect asked with growing dread. "Oh yes," Santos replied enthusiastically. "Venus is a wonderful planet with enormous potential, but it needs some serious atmospheric work before it's comfortable for human habitation. The surface temperature is only around 400 degrees, and the atmospheric pressure is far too low for serious industrial development. We're planning to increase both to more reasonable levels." The casual discussion of making Venus more dangerous rather than more habitable confirmed Zek's worst fears about human psychology. These beings didn't just survive in extreme conditions. They actively sought them out and worked to make them even more challenging. Their idea of planetary improvement involved creating environments that would be instant death traps for every other known species. Red approached with a steaming cup of something that might have been coffee and a friendly smile. "Would you like to see our other facilities while you're here? We've got some wonderful projects running that might interest you. The deep thermal mining operation is particularly impressive. We're working about 50 kilometers down where the pressure and temperature create some fascinating geological effects. The invitation to tour human facilities that were apparently located inside planetary cores represented such a departure from normal diplomatic protocol that Thrace found himself actually considering it. His military mission had failed completely, but the intelligence value of understanding human capabilities might justify continuing the contact. Dr. Reed, Thrace's voice came through the CUM system with careful formality. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I would like to request a formal ceasefire and the opening of diplomatic communications. Of course, Reed replied cheerfully. Though I should mention that we never really considered this a fight. We thought you were conducting some kind of stress test on our equipment systems. Your weapons provided excellent data on our infrastructure's resilience under extreme conditions. The revelation that the humans had interpreted the entire military assault as a scientific experiment rather than an attack sent a final wave of shock through the alien forces. They had deployed their most devastating weapons and tactics against beings who had never even realized they were in danger. As the sun set over Haven 7's scarred but still functioning landscape, the humans busied themselves with preparing dinner using equipment powered by alien weapons fire. They had invited their attackers to join them for a meal and an evening of technical discussions about improved methods for energy weapons design and extreme environment survival techniques. Captain Thrace called an emergency meeting with the Galactic Council leadership to report that humanity's expansion couldn't be stopped by military force because humans thrived in exactly the conditions that would destroy any attacking fleet. Their colonies were located in places where conventional weapons actually made the environment more comfortable for human habitation rather than less. The final reports from Haven 7 painted a picture that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Humans weren't just another aggressive species expanding through superior technology or military might. They were something unprecedented in recorded history, beings who had turned environmental adaptation into such an art form that they could literally live anywhere in the universe. Dr. Reed's closing comments to the departing alien forces summarized the situation with characteristic human optimism. Thank you all for visiting Haven 7. This has been one of our most productive days in months. The energy input from your weapon system solves several technical problems we've been working on, and the atmospheric data from your bombardment will advance our research by years. He paused to make some notes in a journal that had somehow survived multiple direct hits from weapons designed to vaporize armored vehicles. Oh, and please feel free to come back anytime. We're planning to start the Venus project next year, and we could really use some help with the preliminary atmospheric heating. Your orbital weapons would be perfect for the initial phase work. As the Dominion's Edge limped away from Haven 7 with its crew forever changed by the encounter, the humans returned to their daily routines. Reed resumed his agricultural experiments, using soil that had been improved by alien weapons fire. Santos continued her atmospheric research with data that would have been impossible to collect under normal conditions. Bradley went back to his mining operations, now enhanced with better understanding of controlled fusion processes. The galaxy would never be quite the same. Every species that heard the reports from Haven 7 would have to reconsider their assumptions about human expansion and what it meant for the future of interstellar civilization. The terrifying truth was becoming clear. Humanity didn't conquer worlds through force or claim territory through aggression. They simply moved into neighborhoods that were too dangerous for anyone else to survive, made themselves comfortable, and invited their neighbors over for coffee. In a universe full of species fighting over habitable worlds, humans had discovered infinite living space in all the places that everyone else considered uninhabitable. Their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military capability. It was their cheerful refusal to acknowledge that anywhere in the universe was actually too dangerous to call home.